Time is one of the great archetypical experiences of humanity that has eluded all our attempts to give it a fully rational explanation. It is not surprising that, initially, it was considered a deity, even as a manifestation of the supreme divinity, from which flows like a river of life. Only in modern Western physics has time become part of the mathematical framework that we consciously use to describe physical events. The mind of primitive man made fewer distinctions than ours between external and internal facts, material and psychic. Primitive man lived in a torrent of interior and exterior experience that, at any given moment, produced a distinct set of coexisting events and thus, changed incessantly, both quantitatively and qualitatively. Our seemingly self-evident concepts of past, present, and future are not even universal. For example, they do not exist in the Hopi language. The Hopi universe presents two basic aspects, that which is manifest and, consequently, more objective, and that which begins to manifest and is more subjective. Concrete objects are manifest, and for this reason, they belong to the past. Internal images, representations, expectations, and feelings are subjective, on their way toward manifestation, and thus, tend more toward the future. The present is the edge of the blade where something ceases to begin to manifest, it is already past, or is about to begin to manifest. For the Hopi, there is no continuous flow of time, but rather a multiplicity of events that are subtly distinguished. The creator of all is Ane Himu, powerful being, who is a kind of cosmic breath. Children also do not live simultaneously within our hourly convention. It has been shown that they perceive rhythm, speed, and frequency much earlier than they begin to adapt to our usual idea of time. From humanity's original perspective, time was life itself and its divine mystery. And it still is in the concept of time in ancient Greece. In fact, the Greeks identified time with Oceanus, the divine river that circled the earth and also encompassed the universe in the form of a circular stream or serpent biting its tail, with the zodiac at its back. It was also called chrono, time, and later it was identified with Cronus, father of Zeus, and the god Ian. In its origin, Ian referred to the vital fluid of living beings and, consequently, to their life expectancy in the destiny assigned to them. This fluid continued to exist after death in the form of a serpent. It was a generative substance, as was the water of the earth and, above all, ocean Cronus, the creator and destroyer of all. The philosopher Pherecydes proclaimed that the basic substance of the universe was time, chronos, from which fire, air, and water were produced. Likewise, ocean was a kind of primordial soul of the world. In the Hellenistic era, Aeon Cronus was identified with Zervan, the Iranian god of time. The Iranians discerned between two aspects of this supreme divinity, Zervan Akarana, the infinite time, and Zervan Daragakvathata, the time of long dominion. The latter was the cause of decay and death and was occasionally identified with Ahriman, the principle of evil. The Orphic and Mithraic circles of ancient times identified Zervan, simultaneously embodying its opposite aspects, with Aeon. A text invokes it with the following words: I greet you, who occupy the entire structure of the air, spirit who extends from the sky to the earth, and to the confines of the abyss. Spirit who also penetrates me to leave me again. You, servant of the solar rays, you who illuminate the world. Immense and mysterious circular form of the universe, celestial spirit, ethereal, earthly, fiery, windy, luminous. Dark spirit that shines like a star. Lord, God of the eons. Ruler of all. In this case, Aeon, the god of time, is a clear image of the dynamic aspect of existence, of what we today could call the principle of psychophysical energy. All opposites, change and permanence, and even good and evil, life and death, are included in this cosmic principle. At times, Ian was identified with the solar god who, evidently, is the great indicator of temporal measurements. The initiate prays to him, O Lord, who with your spirit links the fiery keys of the fourfold belt. Walker of fire, creator of light, breather of fire, with burning courage. Ian, Lord of light, open your gates to me. This deity inherited various aspects of Ra, the Egyptian solar god who was the ruler of time. This supreme divinity changed forms every hour of the day and night. For example, it awakened as a beetle and descended to the world of the dead as a crocodile. At the moment of resurrection, after midnight, it adopted the figure of Rudi, the lion god, the yesterday and the tomorrow. Osiris, the resurrected human being who became a god, also says about himself, "I am the yesterday, the today, and the tomorrow." He dwells in the house of eternity, or the house of millions of years. In addition to the solar god, the ancient Egyptians personified infinite time in a specific god, He, whose right arm held Ankh, the symbol of life. Just like in Greece, in Egypt the serpent was also associated with time. It represented life and health, and each individual was protected by a serpent of the time of life, which was the spirit of time and survival after death. In India, the same archetypal symbolism of time is present, not only as the supreme divinity but also as an incessant torrent of life and death. In the Bhagavad Gita, 4th or 3rd century BCE, the god Krishna reveals himself to Arjuna in his most terrible form. Arjuna sees in the deity all the gods united. "I see an infinite figure, in which all figures merge into innumerable bodies, arms, and eyes." Amid a great flood, the figures disappear into his fiery jaws and are swiftly consumed. Vishnu says, "I know that I am time, which makes the worlds perish when I ripen and come to bring them destruction." Not only Vishnu but also Shiva represents time. He symbolizes the energy of the universe, increasingly creative and sustaining the forms in which it manifests itself. Shiva is called Mahakala, the great time, or Kala Rudra, the time that devours all. His Shakti, or active energy, appears in its destructive form personified in the terrible goddess Kali, who is time, as Kali is the feminine form of Kala, meaning time, the dark color, and death. The philosophy considers that this world is unreal and deceptive. It is time that deceives the human mind, binds it, and induces it to believe exclusively in its fleeting nature. In fact, this perishable and changing world is a kind of illusion, precisely for him, the enlightened one, who knows it. The sun never rises nor sets. For him, the day is eternal. That eternal day is God properly understood. A Native American from Delaware described his vision of God in similar terms: "A great man dressed with the day, the most radiant he had ever seen, a day of many years, even of eternal duration. The whole world had unfolded upon him, so that you could see the earth and all things." Although in China the supreme divinity has not always been personified, time is also considered an aspect of the basic, dynamic, and creative principle of the universe. Thus, time is part of the masculine principle yang, symbolized by 3 straight lines. Its feminine equivalent, yin, represented by 3 broken lines, is associated with space. Together, these principles express the Tao, the hidden law that governs the cosmos. Yang, the creator, operates in the world of the invisible, with spirit and time as the field. Yin, the receptive, influences the material in space and brings material things to their conclusion. From this perspective, time is the means of making real what is potential. The set of lines that symbolize the duplicated yang is called Chyen, heaven, and refers to celestial movement, which is infinite. This duration in time is the image of the inherent power of the creative principle, and its symbol is the dragon. It produces quality, while the receptive principle produces quantity. As Mark Granite has demonstrated, yang and yin are not static cosmic principles but rather cosmic rhythms that alternate. In China, time has never been considered an abstract parameter or an empty period. Che, the word used for time, rather signifies a favorable or adverse circumstance for action. Granite argues that time and space were considered a bundle of occasions and places, a cluster of coinciding events. What links these occasions is the term chin, which means duration, past times, the present, the morning and the evening combined to form duration. However, sometimes time has no definition, as the beginning of time lacks duration. While they are in a germinal process, situations are outside of time, and humans can influence them. They only become fixed entities once they enter duration time. The close relationship between time and the cosmic creative energy that emanates from the supreme divinity is also present in the conceptions of time held by the Mayas and Aztecs. In the Maya language, the word most frequently used to refer to time is kin, and it is almost always represented by the hieroglyph shon, which means sun and day. It is composed of a four-petaled flower, a type of plumeria. The lines extending from below are the solar beard, sun ties, or solar arrows. In my opinion, these represent the vital creative energy of the sun. In this aspect, the snake is also present. The Mayans worshipped a two-headed snake, one of whose heads represented life, and the other, death. For the Aztec civilization, time was linked to the supreme divinity, the creator god Ometectli, the mother and father of all things, whom they called the mirror that illuminates the whole, the Lord of fire and the Lord of time. In the beginning, this deity created four gods: Tezcatlipoca Red, located in the east, the Black One, residing in the north, the White One, inhabiting the west, and the Blue One, corresponding to the south. These four gods were associated with certain plants, animals, and qualitatively distinct years. The god of fire lives in the center. Consequently, the four Tezcatlipoca created the rest of the things. Only with them did space and time fully enter the world. The Aztec concept of time contains an element of abruptness. At a certain moment, the east and positive forces dominate, and at another, the north and austerity. Today we live in good times, but tomorrow the days may be grim. A wise poet says, "Is there, by chance, any truth in our words here and now? Everything seems like a dream." Another says that we will only know his face after death, referring to the supreme deity whose name is Motion Viento, wind, and is, furthermore, an inscrutable mystery. In contrast to these myths where God is time, and also non-time, the Judeo-Christian tradition holds that God is completely beyond time since he created it with the universe. After God separated the waters of the firmament from those below and created the sun and the moon, day and night came into existence, and time began. Although we believe that material nature follows laws and causes certain events to repeat over time, there are also miracles, magical phenomena, and recurring parapsychological events that are attributed to the direct intervention of the Creator God. Thus, there is a constant and spectacular confrontation with his creation and humanity. The most radical of these events, which divided time into a clearly defined before and after, is the incarnation of Christ. According to the first epistle of Peter, 3:18, for Christ also suffered once for sins. Hapax, semel. As a result, the unfolding of history is governed and oriented by a unique event that cannot be repeated. Given the promise of Christ's return, the early Christian congregations were oriented more toward the future than the past, for they awaited the glorious return of Jesus. Similarly, the Jews await the arrival of the Messiah at the end of times. Saint Augustine incorporates a new aspect of the notion of time into the Christian tradition, the idea that God is not only present in the cosmos but also in the innermost parts of the human soul. Thus, time, also considered divine work, acquires a psychological nuance. The present is nothing more than an experience of the soul, the past is an image of the memory imprinted on the soul, and the future only exists as a psychic expectation. Current time is transient and insignificant, it disappears when the soul unites with God. Later, I will analyze the partial return to the cyclical idea of time in Christian civilization. What never disappeared was the association between time and the idea of direct divine intervention in the world. Even Isaac Newton believed in absolute space and absolute time flow, both of which were divine emanations, despite the fact that, in practical physics, they had become parameters and time was measured through moving bodies. This incipient separation between divine time and measurable time is related to the development of the clock, the instrument we use to measure time. The original image or intuition of time as a river or flow constitutes the foundation of the devices used to measure time, which were based on the flow of a substance, a liquid, such as in water clocks or mercury clocks, or sand. It seems that it was the Chaldeans or the Egyptians who invented the water clock, or clepsydra. The water flowed from the upper receptacle to the lower one, which was graduated. This measurement was based on an error because, in fact, water flows more slowly when the pressure in the upper container decreases. In classical antiquity, clepsydras were widely used. Around 100 BC, one was installed in the market of Athens to mark official time. The Athenian and Roman courts used them to time and limit speeches. In the Middle Ages, water clocks were used in Asia and Europe. The hourglass, which also relies on the idea of time as flow, was always less accurate. It seems that it was only used starting in the 14th century. In addition to water, fire is also a symbol of cosmic energy, as we saw in the numerous divine images we just mentioned. This is why fire was also used to measure time. In a treatise from 1206, the Arab Al-Yasir describes a light clock, a candle that burned for 13 hours, in holes made at different levels. It contained small balls. As each hour passed, one of the balls would fall and activate a small mechanical figure that trimmed the wick. The Chinese were the ones who most frequently used fire to measure time. They scattered combustible powder around a labyrinth, generally circular, and lit it at one end so that, as it burned, it slowly advanced like a wick. They often placed conventional phrases in the center, such as long life or double good fortune, and the pebbles, attached to a thread in specific places, would fall when the wick burned and would serve to wake up the person sleeping. The systems that measure time through the flow of a substance or the combustion of a powder imply that time is a linear flow. Similarly, Western classical physics used a line as the representation of time, along with the three parameters of Euclidean space, for all its measurements and descriptions of physical phenomena. The great change occurred when Albert Einstein realized that temporal indications were always related to the position of the observer. Due to the magnitude of the speed of light, 300,000 km per second, we can ignore this fact in practical macroscopic physics. However, as soon as the observer is also moving at high speed, the time lapse between the event and its observation becomes a problem if we want to establish the succession of events. Two events that an observer sees occurring simultaneously may, for others, occur in different temporal sequences. In high-energy physics, where we observe reciprocal actions between atomic particles moving almost at the speed of light, the time factor is completely relative. The notion of a spacetime coordinate system as something objective no longer holds. It is simply a means that the observer uses to describe their specific environment. Similarly, Einstein was aware of the need for the laws of nature to be formulated in such a way that they present the same form in all coordinate systems, that is, all observers, regardless of their positions or movements, must be satisfied with the description of electromagnetic phenomena only if all spatial and temporal specifications are relative. Any modification of the coordinate systems combines space and time in a mathematically defined way. Thus, space and time are inextricably intertwined and form a four-dimensional continuum that, in a broad sense, is referred to as the Minkowski and Einstein universe. Although on a higher level and with mathematical precision, this Einsteinian postulate seems to be a return to the secular and primitive intuition that time and space were created simultaneously, as in the case of the Aztec god Ometeotl, with the four Tezcatlipoca at the four corners of space. Fritjof Capra cites the Avatamsaka Sutra of Mahayana Buddhism, which holds that, upon reaching the state of illuminated dissolution, we stop distinguishing between mind and body, between subject and object, and realize that each object is related to all others, not only spatially but temporally. As a datum of pure experience, there is no space without time, nor time without space, both interpenetrate. Einstein took another step in his peculiar theory of relativity, a step that, in a strange way, revives the primitive intuition of time as the flow of internal and external events, and which he postulated at the time with an exact mathematical formulation. This step involves including gravity in the representation of spacetime, as it makes it curved. This is because the gravitational fields of massive bodies occupy spacetime. In curved spacetime, curvature not only affects the geometry of space but also the lengths of time intervals. Time does not flow at the same rate as in a flat spacetime, and since curvature varies from one place to another according to the distribution of massive bodies, the same happens with the flow of time. It is an extraordinary coincidence that, approximately at the same time that physicists discovered the relativity of time, C.G. Jung discerned the same fact in his exploration of the human unconscious. In the dream world, time also becomes relative, and it seems that categories like before and after lose their meaning. When we enter the archetypal layer of the unconscious, time seems to disappear completely. In its own way, humanity has always known this. All over the world, stories are told in which a person visits an enchanted hill, paradise, the world of the dead, or the realm of dwarfs, and upon their return, convinced that only an afternoon or a night has passed in that place, they find their contemporaries dead, their village no longer exists, and they learn that only an uncertain rumor remains about a man who disappeared several centuries earlier. Rip Van Winkle and Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving are just examples of this type of narrative. Each time we approach the deepest archetypal reality of the psyche, we are dominated by the sensation of being in contact with something infinite. However, as Jung pointed out, this is the decisive question of our existence: are we or are we not related to something infinite? We will only free ourselves from caring about trivial things if we know that what really matters is the infinite. Ultimately, we are only worth something because we embody the essential, and if it were not so, all life would be wasted. The most suggestive application of the new Einsteinian notion of spacetime corresponds to the field of astrophysics. Since astronomers and astrophysicists deal with immense distances, even light takes a long time to travel from the observed object to the observer. Thus, the astronomer never observes an object in its present state, but rather in the past. Thanks to telescopes, we can see galaxies that, in reality, existed millions of years ago. We can contemplate stars and star clusters in their various evolutionary phases and, so to speak, look back in time. The same can be said about the consequences of gravity. Since stars and galaxies are extremely massive bodies, the curvature of spacetime becomes a relevant phenomenon. Its most extreme consequences are evident during the so-called gravitational collapse of a massive body, which, at least as we suppose today, occurs in black holes. Due to the mutual gravitational attraction of particles, which increases as the distance between them decreases, the star becomes increasingly dense, and thus spacetime curves more and more until, eventually, light can no longer escape the surface. In this way, around the star, the so-called event horizon is formed, beyond which nothing is observable, and clock signals no longer reach us. To a certain extent, the star exits time in relation to us. I believe that a similar phenomenon could occur to us in death. On June 6, 1961, the day C.G. Jung died, a patient of mine who did not know him had the following dream: it was a sunny day, and there were many people in the meadow, Jung among them. He wore a green suit in front and black in the back. There was a black wall with a hole that exactly fit Jung's profile. He entered the hole, and although the present people only saw a black wall, my patient knew that Jung was still there, even if invisible. The woman looked at herself and saw that she was wearing identical clothing, green on one side and black on the other. It is possible that in death we only leave the event horizon of the living but continue to exist in an unobservable state.